describing the last night with...
And the last night we were playing there that I mentioned about them hiring bands to play around his table. To have, say, 4 to 6 people in a table surrounded by 12 pieces of brass and 2 drums is an intensely loud experience. And some of these people would actually ask, to have the horn like right against their ear, maybe one on each side, and the tuba over their head, that is a religious experience to have. And you come to Jesus with a tuba over your head.
What do you mean a tuba over your head?
I mean, they would put the bell of the tuba over your head and play, and these guys don't back off. It's painful. I've had that happen to me once. That's plenty for me. They'll pay extra for that. I mean, it's like a little S&M. I don't know. There's a macho thing going on or something that it's okay not to participate in that. But Slobodan's father had a way of playing when he would do solos sometimes on 1 or 2 tunes where he would get down very close. Actually, both Slobodan and his father, when they played solos for women, where guys maybe wanted them to play for their wives, they would back off. They'd play very sweetly for them. Slobodan had a nice touch that way.
So he played differently for the women than for the men?
Yes, and Slobodan particularly so. There was a gleam in his eye when he played too. Risky business hiring Slobodan to play for your wife, I think. But his father, though, had a way of where he would actually reach up and take his hands off the mechanism that works the valves and actually grab the top of the valve itself. It's a rotary valve. And he would basically have the valve half open and half closed and blow in the horn in such a way that it had this soft, squealy kind of sound to it that kind of between notes but not very loud. And there was a very special sweetness about it and unique. I hadn't seen other people do that. Both Catherine and I have played at doing that in the band. I've never performed it with the band, but it takes a little something, a different controls, a different way of playing, and I haven't seen anyone else that did that. And he did that for us that last night at the festival in 1990. So it was.
So then, did you stick around for a few days, or you took off after
We
that?
pretty much went back to Belgrade and flew out the next day. I had one more day for my flight because I was going Swiss Air. I had a yacht to Zurich and then Swiss Air from Zurich.
Did it change your life in any way?
Well, I was moving back east, and I was clear I wanted to be a full-time member of the band and participate in this even more than I already had been. So it brought a focus to it. I've hardly played a trumpet or cornet since I bought my rotary valve flugelhorn in 1990.
Right.
I love that horn. When I got it, it was really beaten up. It was almost closed off in a couple of places from the dents in it, and I developed a way to knock those dents out and reform the horn so it worked. And I really do like the horn a lot. And 2 years ago when I was here, and it's with me playing it for 13 years, and God knows how long Ekram played it, and Hard Life in his hands. Some of the people tried it out, so this is a nice horn, good horn. So I've been happy with it. But changed my life.
It's not that it has to, but
yeah.
How were you different in any way when you came back? I mean,
well, I did join the band full time when I came back. It was my intention to do that anyway, but joining the Zlatne Uste Orchestra is it's an interesting experience in itself. It's not like you go through some hazing like the Skull and Bones or anything, but there was a fairly intense focus when I joined the band at that time too. There was a fairly major gig that we had coming up to play for first night in Portland, Maine, New Year's Eve, and it was going to be a radio show, and one of the stronger horn players was not going to be able to go on that. So Michael took the time to work with me and to bring me up to speed quickly. So I would meet with Michael once or twice a week in the afternoon, and we would spend an hour or two where he would work with me to show me the ornamentation and work with me on exactly how he wanted me to back him up on tunes and play the second part or double his part, and what he needed me to do to support him playing. So he was making that effort, I was making that effort, and enjoying that. I sometimes refer to the band as chosen family. The band's well over 20 years old, and we still rehearse once a week, and we're scattered over 3 states from down south of Princeton, and I'm up in New Haven, Connecticut. So it's a commitment to be a member of the band, and not everyone can make to all of the gigs and all of the rehearsals and everything there, but it's at some level there's to really be a part of the band, there's a commitment to it. So there was that was a change of life, that I'm committing to be at a rehearsal once a week and do all the shows you can do. We also had a recording coming up. We were working on our second album and getting the recording time. So now that I was a member of the band, I had to get up to speed on all of the things for the recording studio. And aside from the music, each of the different members of the band brings other stuff, other energy, other talents, other skills to it. Even more so in 1990, that it was largely a band by committee. It wasn't always clear who was leading what. My brother had a leadership role on some things, but Michael has always been a strong leader figure in the band. Michael was a person who, in the early days anyway, transcribed a lot of the music, which Michael has a good ear for that, and he can write out the music. My brother was very frustrated with that because he couldn't do that. He didn't have the writing skill, and he didn't have the ear for it, but he had tunes he wanted to play. But if they weren't written out at that time, it was harder to get the band to go for it. He was kind of instrumental in pushing to get away from the sheet music. He would, I guess at some points, before I was a full-time member, but he came in and said, I want us to play this tune and had a cassette tape. I want you all to listen to it. We're going to play it next week, kind of thing. And that was transformational for the band. When we got away from sheet music, we virtually do nothing from sheet music at all now, and haven't for many, many years.
So how does the process work?
Well, we have tapes now at CDs. Typically somebody will have a piece of music that they want us to play. We'll sort of agree that we'll at least give it a try. Someone will make copies of the CDs for everyone in the band to listen to. That's very often Morgan. God bless him. He does a great job at putting music together for us. And we'll listen to it and get together and play it. And we're getting better and better at it. We can actually get the skeletal version of a tune down in one session now, and then go woodshed it and polish it as we go. But
you mean you listen to it, you can do it on the spot?
Yeah. Some stuff we've gotten where we can actually just listen to something and play it. We've had some experiences in weddings where somebody's come up and said, "Can you play this tune?" And I've never heard of this tune. How's it going? And like, no, and we'll just start doing it. And they're usually drunk at the time, so the critique is pretty. You got the rhythm section going, they get to dance to it, and it's like the best thing ever happened to them.
Right. So in some ways, you became more traditional.
Yes, and we've grown as musicians a lot, and as a band, a lot. We also know we all have our own different personalities. We are like chosen family that way, and some people are not comfortable doing that kind of learning and on the spot stuff, and others of us are willing to jump in there and at least get with the rhythm. And we are a dance band. Not that we don't do concert stuff, but we're fundamentally a dance band, so rhythm's got to be happening. And that's a big part of it for us.
Mm-hmm.
I have a saying that we play music to dance to, not march to. That there's some very nationalistic march-like tunes that we just plain refuse to play. We used to tell people we didn't know the tune, but we can't get away with that. We're really too good right now because the tunes aren't that hard. They're the kind of tunes that you could hum and we could play along. So we just say we don't play that tune.
So I was curious how you choose your repertoire, how you remember which tunes you do. Do you keep lists of the tunes you do? How you kind of work all that out? You know, how tunes come and go? Do tunes come and go, or do you still play everything you've always played?
Yes to all of that. There are lists somewhere on somebody's computer of tunes that we've done at some point, and we occasionally try to categorize that. Sometimes we'll look through it. The current playlist is an evolutionary piece of work. We don't have any written out current playlist ever. It's almost like a running joke in the band, and we're getting ready to do a concert, and so what are we going to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? What tunes do we want to do? And we have gotten in the last years of making a bit of a set list, and if it's a concert, we'll probably actually do the set list. If it's some other kind of a interactive thing, it's just be variable. People will request something, and it's not on our set list. If we know it and played it in the last 10 years, we'll play it. There are often times that we would be playing in a situation, and Michael or somebody usually Michael will think of something that would be great to play that maybe we haven't played in 10 years, and certainly hadn't rehearsed in 10 years or more, and just start playing, and we jump in there and grab a piece of it and hang on. Sometimes some of the newer members of the band, the newest member of the band's probably, other than Sato, the drummer who's joined us, has been with the band 5 years now, maybe. And she'll turn and like, what is this? Where did this come from? We'll tell you later when you're playing here.
Right. Well, there's something really nice about being together for 20 years.
Yeah. I would guess that there's probably over 100 tunes that we could play. Just launch off on it and we could go with it. I don't know how other people catalog those things in their heads. For me personally, I've realized that at least some of the things, there's a kinesthetic memory that I have. I couldn't even hum the next phrase that's coming, but it's somewhere in my fingers and my hand, and it comes out. There's some tunes that I have not been able to consciously learn the tune, and I can play it though. I dread it every time it comes up. It's like this fear of, oh God, I know I don't know this tune, and then it comes out of my horn somehow once again.
Right.
Now there's some that don't come out, and there are a couple that I just don't play on.
Right.
I've not taken the time or effort or whatever. I'm not inspired about. Now you ask how we pick stuff. It's usually somebody in the band has heard something and they want to play it, and then they bring it to the band, and we sort of by committee agree to do it. We will come back. Typically, we go over to Gucha, where one of these festivals. This is the first time we're going to a festival that isn't Gucha. And we go to a festival and we hear what's popular. We hear what people are playing, and we'll be immersed in that around us for 3 or 4 days. And then there are those that stick with us that I like that tune.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm humming it all the way home on the plane. We should play that tune. So we'll pick things that way. Sometimes we may see something in a movie, or we'll get CDs and we'll hear something and, wow, I want a piece of that. We're not terribly commercial about it, though. We don't just jump on whatever is the most popular piece of music that everybody's requesting, and then we have to play it because everybody else does. We don't operate that way. Thank God none of us are trying to make a living out of this. We all have professional lives that pay the rent, and this is it's also I accredit that a large part with why the band works as well as it does, and it's been together as long as it has. We're not driven by the money at all.
Right. Well, ZU, I understand, has a very unique way of working as a band, money-wise.
Yeah, there's not any involved. No, it's not true. We don't pay ourselves cash.
After a gig.
After a gig. We've had, since I've been in the band in 1990, we've had maybe 2 or 3 cash disbursements to the band when the treasury had a bunch of money in it and we didn't have anything particular we wanted to do with it, and those would be along the order of a couple $100. So I've maybe been paid $600 for the 15 years or more I've been playing in the band.
You're not in it for the money.
We're not in it for the money. However, we do charge when we play. We like being paid. We have noticed the phenomenon that the more you're paid, the better respected you are by whoever you're playing for, and the more they seem to enjoy it, and the more interactiveness there is. So there's something about the monetary transaction that, in my world anyway, that enhances the experience of the band, both for us and for the listeners. Now, that said, we then use whatever money we do collect to defray expenses, such as this trip. This particular trip, we didn't have enough money in the till to pay for the whole trip, so some of us fronted money to cover those expenses. And we'll get paid back over the next year or so as we make it back.
Right.
The recordings that we've done, we've paid for those out of pocket up front, and then shopped them around to different record labels to distribute them for us, but we gave them finished product, so we had complete artistic control over everything about it.
How does that change music making for you, do you think?
Change music making?
Yeah. If you're not getting paid for every gig, does it change it? I mean, have you been in paying bands?
I've never been in a paying band, so I can't really address that question.
Well, it's an interesting question for me because, our band, everybody wants to get paid all the time, but it leads to pressures at times.
Yeah, it means that there's not any. It cuts out a lot of potential conversations like, well, I play all the solos, I should get more dough, or I know all the tunes and you don't, or you're a new kid in town, how do you fit in, and you got to pay some dues here. I've been going to rehearsal for 20 years. Why do you deserve the same amount? None of those conversations happen because there's no money. You can't talk about how the money's distributed if you're not distributing money. There are occasional conversations that come up more about transportation and tolls across the Hudson River and whether we should be paying for that or not, and who should get paid for that, and those surface occasionally.
So I want to go back to being a band that doesn't use sheet music. How does that change the experience, do you think?
Well, it was an interesting thing when they made the transition for that. A couple of things happened. One, we tightened up musically as a band. We started being with the other band members rather than being with the sheet music.
Did you notice that right away?
Yeah, it was pretty stark. The nature also of this music in its natural setting is you are playing interactively with the dancers, the listeners. It's a very interactive, intimate experience to play this. It's not concert hall type music. So getting away from sheet music means you don't have anything between you and the audience. At first it was more of a memory. I actually was trying to remember what the notes were on the page. So at first I'm still seeing the page, but later I just get with the sound. What's it sound like? What's it feel like? What's it there? So that musically it tightened up. We got more intimate with our audience and our target audience, and we became more mobile. So all of those things were big pluses. I think that over the time it's improved all of our ears so that we can learn tunes much faster. It used to be learning tunes in the band was, for some people, very traumatic. Actually, for everybody. The people who could pick it up quickly were frustrated as hell that other people couldn't pick it up quickly, and those that couldn't pick it up quickly were frustrated because they were feeling like idiots, and however they felt about it. I felt like an idiot. Or, I would hear something and like, I got this, why can't you hear it? And now that we've all been in that same game for a while, we've all developed significantly greater capacities to deal with that, and there's still a wide range. I realized that I've always been a lead player in whatever I've played, high school bands, whatever I played, I was a lead player. So I listen to lead lines. I'm pretty much a one-note listener. And I've come to appreciate and realize that there are people in the band who hear way more in music than I do. They hear 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 notes at a time and how they work together. And now I can hear the one note in any line. I can listen to a baritone part and I can hear what the one note they're playing at any given. I can listen to the tuba part and I can get that, but I can't hear it all at once. And I'm starting to, but I've developed a real appreciation for the people in the band that have much greater capacity for that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you have sectionals? Do you learning a new tune? Do the trumpets go off?
Now we do that more. We find that works better. We'll first start a first pass at it. Typically, we'll have the CD. We'll listen to it. We'll make a first try at it. Usually, whoever's bringing the tune to the group, has worked on it some and can give clues, if not have already worked it out for themselves. Then we'll typically break up into the sectionals for usually not long. I'd say somewhere between 15 minutes and a half an hour, and then get back together and muster through it. After that, we pretty much play it together. We don't do a lot of sectional work. It would probably be good for us too, but we have not a lot of sectional rehearsals. How much we work and how we work varies a lot on what's in front of us, performance-wise. Performance always brings a greater deal of focus and intensity than sometimes. If we don't have anything big, we'll just go around the room at rehearsal and each one of us will pick a tune that we want to play and work on, or just because we like the tune and want to feel good about playing it. And we'll just go around the room and each person will, I want to play this one, and then we'll play it.
So, 2 years ago you went back to Uste.
Yes,
and,
the 13-year hiatus.
13 years.
A war.
The war had happened. Communism had fallen.
Yes.
The band had gotten older, better musicians.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah,
What did you notice? What was different?
A lot of differences.
Yeah.
The festival has grown enormously. Just the intensity of the number of people, younger people. When I was in 90, it had a sort of a trade day, swap meet, county fair kind of feel about it. There would be, in the center of the square, there would be the tents with the roasting animals and food and drink and the bands working, and then around the outside, the perimeter of the square, the town square, there would be vendors, and they would be selling everything from rakes and hoes and axes to shoes and shirts and farm implements and cooking utensils and all manner of stuff that you might find at a county once a month trade day or something like that in traditional America. This, in 2003, it was just about, there was a beer kiosk, there was a music outlet, and then there was a beer kiosk and there was a music outlet. some tchotchkes and a few clothing things. And the clothing things would tend to be T-shirts and underwear with sayings and slogans and cute pictures on it, often in English. There's a real garishness about that. It was intensely loud, and that all of these places with recordings for sale had constantly playing CDs cranked to the max on cheap speakers. So in one block you might have 5 or 6 different sound systems playing different versions maybe of the same tune in different places in the CD. So there's this, and then there would be the people drinking and dancing in the street, blowing whistles and other noise-making devices. And depending on which CD they might be influenced by, it could be in any rhythm, or so it had an unholy volume of cacophonous sound that was not particularly pleasing to most of us in the band, maybe none of us in the band. And it was a little bit ironic and sad to me that the very musicians that were on these CDs were literally on the other side of a tarpaulin in the back of this kiosk in a restaurant waiting for someone to hire them to play for them. So you could have Slobodan Saljevich play for you, but they would have 3 of his CDs would be going blaring down the street, and he would be sitting there waiting for someone to play for. So it was very, that piece was probably the most stark difference to me. Other things that had happened, it's become obviously more commercial in that respect, but they've added a Saturday night concert that goes all night. So these bands would come and play at the concert, and they would go back and work the tables when they're not there. And this concert is televised, it's recorded, and it's sent out over the internet. It's a pretty big deal. With depending on who counts, anywhere from 30 to 70,000 people in the soccer field. There's no way to count the people. It's just this ocean. It's definitely rock concert kind of stuff.
It's the same soccer field as before?
Same soccer field as before. It's a rural kind of soccer field, so it's not like there's stadium bleachers. It just goes up into the trees and the hills, and as far as you can see, there are people. And at the far end of it, there's a Ferris wheel and carnival rides. They had fireworks, they had hot air balloons, they had 20 some odd cameras, a mega sound system, and it went all night long. So it has impacted that richness of the live music in the tents where it was, and because it's grown and now there are hundreds of thousands of people attending the festival, there are tents set up across the river, down the road, so it's dispersed the focus of it. Some of the tents have hired the bands to work exclusively in their tent, so they don't roam around like they did in the past. I'm sure it's better money for the musicians probably, but that whole commercialization of it and the volume and the pack intensity of the people was more than, I think it was shocking to us. We wanted it to be that same intimacy and focused on the music and the musicians rather than just this event. It's part of why we're coming to this other festival this time. We're hoping that this preliminary competition in Surdulica, you have to qualify in various competitions to get to Guča, and Surdulica is one of those qualifying events, and it's in a Roma-rich area, and we're hoping that it's a smaller, more intimate festival. We have no real idea if that's going to be the case or not. But that's part of why we've chosen to go to this one.
Yeah, I understand there were maybe some negative experiences in Guča, sort of uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, there were. We made a very tactical error there. Many of us, from those in the band from the 1990 trip, remembered the wonderful experience playing in the tables at Guccia, and we wanted to relive that experience. We wanted to be able to play for people with his food and drink and have that connectedness there. But because there's so many other scheduled events going on, including in this particular night, there was a concert on the radio stage earlier. This was a Friday night, I believe. This festival's another day longer. It starts on Thursday now. We kind of got trapped behind this concert. Where we stayed was kind of reserved as our space, was actually behind the stage, so it was difficult to come and go while there was something going on. And Boban Markovic was playing there. He has done an enormous amount to popularize this music around the world. He is now an iconic figure in this brass band movement. But part of what's happened out of that is he's become more mainstream, and the music doesn't have the richness and texture, his music now, as some of the South Vranja bands, South Serbia bands and stuff. He's an incredible, talented technician. His band is rehearsed so tight. Unarguably, they're one of the best bands. That his second horn player has been a first Prva winner, and so he's great, and he doesn't play the music that speaks to most of the people in the band that much. So we went out very late in the evening after this concert that wouldn't end, finally wound up. We didn't realize how late it was, or I certainly didn't realize how late it was, but we wanted to go have that experience. So we went out, and there weren't that many people out. And we played for a couple of different people, but nobody had any money, and they were mostly going off to bed. And this one person finally brought us over to play for him, and he started paying us with $100 bills. And it's in a part of the square where we've actually had negative experiences before. It's one particular relatively dark part of the square. And then he immediately brought over a couple of women to dance on the table while we played. So it wasn't about, we weren't getting that intimate, personal. He was like showing off for his buddy there. And he started talking about something. We weren't quite sure what it was, but he was pretty passionate about it. Turns out it was quite political. And then at one point he pulled out a T-shirt with one of the war crime figures on it, and tried to get one of the women in the band to wear this T-shirt while she played for him. One of the things that we're not always the best at when we start playing in that environment is to be focused on each other. So we were scattered around this table, and my brother and I were playing a couple of tunes here for this person, and we were focusing on that. We were aware that something unpleasant was happening on the other side of the table, but we weren't sure what. And we don't speak the language enough to know how to extricate ourselves from the situation, and it went from bad to worse to finally we just had the sense that we had to get out of the situation somehow, and basically we just went all different directions, like turn the light on in the kitchen at night and the cockroaches run out. And we left our interpreter and Michael to, make our apologies, explain to the guy whatever they had to do to deal with that. And we all went back to the Dom Culture, our sort of safe haven, and spent quite a while going around letting people talk through whatever their experience was, so that we were able and willing to play the next day. So we had obligations to play and do stuff the next day. It left a very sour taste in our mouths, and some of the people that had not experienced and still haven't experienced that funness of playing for the tables are that's their experience of playing for tables. I can still reference my experience from previous trips, right, and know that this was an unfortunate anomaly, and that we had no business actually going out at whatever it was at 2 or 3 in the morning, or
right,
and thinking we were going to hook up with something like that. It was, I should say here, and you're probably not going to be in an edited version, all of what I say is just my interpretation of this. I am way not... Everyone in the band has their own take, and if you talk to each person about that night, you'll probably have 12 different experiences of it. It's questionable whether we would, as a band, whether we would go back to Gucci again, given the... And we had some wonderful experiences last time as well. Peak one for me was the midnight concert they did.
The
Saturday night concert that they do now. I'm one of the people in the band who really likes to be in a performance role. I love being on stage, and literally or figuratively. I get excited about literally moving people with the music and playing. And to be able to be on that stage in front of maybe as many as 50 to 70,000 people and have them go crazy when we started to play in a positive way. They were throwing beer all over themselves. They were dancing. We could hear them singing the songs back at us. That was just unbelievable for me. I didn't know it at the time that it was on every television station in Serbia. It was broadcast worldwide on the Serbian satellite television, on the World Wide Web. I had no idea it was, or I would have had somebody copy it or record it or something. But to have 20 to 30 minutes of peak time, it wasn't like they put us on at 1 in the morning. We were on, 10 o'clock or something. I don't remember what time, but it was definitely a prime time slot. We were a featured performance in that evening. And it wasn't without tension and upset along the way. There were... we had come down a week early before the festival this year and went down to Vranska Banja and arranged to work with an orchestra there, one of the better top bands, the Zlatne Orchestra. And a very convoluted, multifaceted set of circumstances for which you can have many, many, many versions of. But there was a move afoot to have us play together on stage at the festival with the Zlatne Orchestra and the Zlatne Uste Orchestra. And they taught us some tunes and new tunes, which is what we came to do, and we integrated our bands and rehearsed that. And in the end, the Zlatne Orchestra had not qualified to compete at Gucci because their agent had sent them out of the country to make money. So they didn't compete in any of the qualifying events. And the way the festival is set up, because there is this money available playing for tables, that they don't allow uninvited bands, unqualified bands, to play there. So they wouldn't allow the Zlatne Orchestra to be there. So we weren't going to get to play, and there was a lot of stuff, well, do we play without them since we planned to do it, and then back and forth. That coupled with that this was being a broadcast performance, my understanding was there were a couple of talking heads somewhere, not on stage, that were setting a context for who we were to playing and some explanation, because clearly we're not, a Serbian band. We're not from here. Which meant we were on stage for somewhere around 5 minutes without playing. There were people in the organizing committee that knew there was this upset with the Zlatne Orchestra and Ekram, and they were concerned that maybe we were boycotting this somehow because we got on stage and then didn't play. So there were tensions with them. 3 years before we'd gone over there, NATO, Bill Clinton in the United States, had bombed Serbia pretty, they'd given them a real pounding. So there was a certain anti-American sentiment that was just below the surface with many people. So while we stood on stage for quite a few minutes, not doing anything, but waiting for someone to say, start playing now, we could hear some people who knew us from the past chanting, New York, New York, New York. But we could also hear other people booing and throwing things at the stage and sort of like that. And I don't know about everyone else, but it crossed my mind that I sure hope one of these idiots out there with a gun doesn't decide to take a pot shot at us or something. And then we finally got the high sign to play. Within 2 notes, we had the whole crowd. We picked very popular tunes to play, and the first tune, those first 2 notes have everybody in the crowd knew exactly what tune we were playing from 2 notes.
What tune is that?
I think it was the Lepi Sfatu that we started to play, and if I remember right, I think that's it. And it starts with a trumpet just going ba-ya, ba-da, and everybody knew it was. That's my memory of it, and it could be faulty. But they were with us. They were singing and chanting and dancing, and the party was on.
Right.
Life was good.
Suddenly there were 15,000 to 70,000 people having a great time.
A great time.
Yeah, that must have been a real rush.
It was a total rush to be up there, and this boom camera swinging around in front of us. And I date myself, but from the TV series The Prisoner, it just reminded me of that. And being accepted as a colleague of all of these other musicians there, and them congratulating us and genuinely affectionately hanging out with us backstage was very moving to me. And then the next day, everyone knew who we were. Everywhere we went in Serbia for the rest of the few days after that, people would recognize us from the television. They checked the rental cars in Belgrade. They said, "You're the ones on the..." Yeah, that was us.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was very cool.
10 minutes of stardom.
Yeah, 20 or so. I love Rockstar.
Yeah.
Rockstar is good.
Yeah. A question that occurred to me before was how many of the bands are Roma and how many of the bands are primarily Slavic?
I don't really know. I'm going to guess there's about a 50-50 split, maybe a few more Roma bands now. In 1990, there was a pretty strict segregation. You wouldn't see any Roma playing in a Slavic band, and certainly no Slavs playing in the Roma bands. That wasn't the case in 2003. There were actually some Roma musicians playing in some of the Slavic bands. Also a change that had happened since the first trips that we made over in the 80s, in 90, there were no women musicians playing in any of the bands here. It was such an anomaly that the first year that they were there, and Marion playing saxophone with the band on television, she was instantly recognizable all over the country as she's the one who, she's the woman who plays in the brass band. It was unheard of.
This was in 1990?
Well, this was back in 87, maybe 88, the first trip. But in 2003, in the young people's competition, there were girls. There's one girl that actually led a band, a trumpet player.
These are Roman? Was this a
No,
Roman
these
band?
were Slavic girls. And girls playing drum, which is even more unheard of. And at the end of the junior competition, Boban Markovic came up and gave the girl one of his horns. Stamp of approval. I can't say that we certainly didn't cause that, but I do think we had a lot of influence on it, in opening a door that may not have occurred to be openable. And in our band now, we have quite a few of them playing in the band. And when we were in 2003, when we were working with him in the Zlatne Orchestra, we had this new younger woman playing in the trumpet section with us, and he was referring to her as the chef, the leader of the band, and so we just started referring to her that way. And for the rest of the trip, Sarah, she's so that was and when she was playing in the Roma community, it was amazing how many of the girls would come up to her and want to try to play her horn. Some of them could play. Yeah, they the first time they'd ever played outside their house. We have a different influence along the way that, God knows we've been way influenced by them, but we've had some influence on them as well. Even the Zlatne Orchestra, when they saw us the first time and we had this name Zlatne Uste, they thought that was kind of cool, because pretty much up until that time all the bands had just a family name. The Baki Orchestra, the Ekram, not Ekrams, but Fiat City Orchestra, whoever it might be. And they took up the Zlatne Prsti Golden Fingers band. That would be cool. So, and this, I don't know how much you can credit us with, having girls start to take up playing instruments in public, but I'm sure we had some influence on it.
We're gonna capture little cutaway stuff.
Yeah. This little town here, I don't even know which one it is, but you can really see those, what I think of as signature red tile roofs out there. So much a part of how I think of and remember this part of the world.
Yeah, me too.
They use the tile for all kinds, it's a very integral part of all of the structures or the domiciles. And they may be mentioned earlier, they're sort of sequentially finished. As you get more money and stuff, you'll add more finish to the house. You'll get a frame, you'll live on the first floor until you can afford to put the second floor together and add more tile, and then if you get all that done, then you'll start to put the stucco over the tile, and eventually it's a white building with a red roof. But it can take many years to get that. You'll see one side will be stuccoed and 2 or 3 sides will be tiled, and you come back a few years later and they've got 3 sides stuccoed and one of them still tiled. Another sort of signature piece, particularly for the Slavs for me, is in their homes always have plants around them, edible plants and ornamental plants, tomatoes and grapes and flowers and roses. I think it's part of what helps make this part of the world as resilient as it is in the face of conflict and economic depression and the ups and downs, and having all of that small but dispersed agricultural production that goes on. It would be hard to imagine having the food supply cut off to New York City for a week. It's just about unimaginable.
Did that happen here?
Well, when the war and the bombing and the being cut off from the outside world, the sanctions coming in, but you would have cousins and uncles who would be living in the country and still have a family farm, and they would bring stuff to you to eat. They would, even in a little town like this, every one of these houses will have gardens, edible gardens around it, so you can survive. You can. It may be harsh, it may not be what you want, but you will live. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you just a couple more questions.
Sure.
How did this music develop, do you think? Do you know the history of it?
I don't really know authoritatively about the history. At Gucci and the Dom Culture, they have a whole historical presentation around the festival in particular and brass band in general. But my understanding is that it was largely came out of the military brass bands, the Turks and the Germans. At the end of the World Wars, there were a surplus of instruments available from the military that were left behind, that some of the earlier formalized brass bands took up and started with that. There are various historical references to some of the musicians that, I forget which battles and this, that, and the other there were, but there was one where I believe it was a Roma musician, had a very good ear, had managed to slip through the enemy lines. This had been probably 100 years ago or so, and was able to play the retreat call such that the enemy retreated from the field of battle where they were otherwise doing pretty well, and literally turned the tide of war, and by being able to play the opposing side's retreat bugle signals, and, and he became a recognized legendary musician. One of the things that does seem to be recurring characteristic piece of what musicians pick up, and particularly the Roma, is loud equals money. If you look historically at the development and what instruments are popular over time, they tend to get louder and louder. When you're some shepherd entertaining yourself with a frula and keeping the flock down, that's the one thing, and it's nice, peaceable kind of instrument. But if you want to draw a crowd that'll pay you something, bagpipe's a better choice, or zorlas, and drums. You can put some volume out with that and entertain more people and get more money. Accordion came in. Here was an instrument that you had the whole orchestra in your hands, and it was pretty loud, and you didn't have to split the take, and so there was more money in it. Well, brass instruments are loud. You can draw a crowd. You can entertain a lot of people, and the power and the energy and the force behind the music literally moves people. As I said earlier, there's a visceral, physical experience about it that is loud. Now, with batteries and high efficiency electronic systems and stuff, that's changing more. You can actually go down the street with electric instruments and electric keyboards and pump out an enormous amount of volume. But that is one of the things that drove the brass band, was that it was loud and physically moving.
Interesting. Do you play any other kind of music?
Not a lot. I play a little bit of guitar. I'm a few blues licks. If I didn't play in the Zlatne Uste orchestra, I'd probably play in some retro rock band and wail on my Strat, and Appalachian folk and blues and retro rock would be the stuff, and I could play a few licks in each one of those genres, but I'm not very accomplished at it. I've played other instruments. My brother and I were a Zorla team. We played the Zorla Brothers. We played that, and I own a number of other instruments. I can play some tunes on Swedish cow horns, and I appreciate a wide range of that, and have dabbled at a few, but the horn's what I play.
Right. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, we can talk about this forever, but it's if anything occurs to you later, that's fine too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take a break.
What inspired you to be doing this whole thing?
This documentary.
Yeah, person around it.
Well,
It's like,
Emo Kusturica, I don't know if he's much of an inspiration for some people, but he certainly is for me. I saw In the Time of the Gypsies when I was...
I've been thinking this was an awful lot. Maybe. I think they really need it for the
He's just a gearhead, but not a gearhead like hot rides, you know, and one of the interesting things. I think he was in World War II, young guy.
So what do you call this? What did you call this, Batya? The Serbian Triangle?
the Surdulica triangle.
Surdulica Triangle.
It's a triangle. Where up is down and down is up.
Lane's foot is off the brake.
Yeah.
Just to prove it. Off.
Out of gear, no parking brake,
No
sitting here in neutral, idling.
And look at this hill.
Teenagers out for a stroll time. Prime time. The striped skirts that you were wearing at the wedding,
Yeah.
a little different pattern. Red edge.